Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to unpack a geopolitical chess match that really changed how we think about national resilience.
It's a fascinating story.
It is. Our mission here is to look at the 2025 trade war between the U.S. and Canada. This was a crisis that pretty much every financial model said would just break the Canadian economy.
Yeah.
And we want to uncover the specific strategies that let them, not just survive, but actually achieve growth and come out stronger on the other side.
And the source material is incredible because the baseline expectation was total economic collapse. I mean, when the Trump administration kicked this off, slapping that big 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum, the goal was pretty explicit.
Oh, yeah.
It was all about disrupting global supply chains and aggressively pulling manufacturing power back to America.
And that initial threat was really designed to be catastrophic. We're not talking about a little trade friction here.
No, this was an economic hammer blow.
Exactly. Meant to completely reshape North American trade, like overnight. Analysts in Washington and Toronto, they were all saying the same thing. They were predicting this crippling 2.6% drop in GDP for Canada.
And punching a $78 billion hole in their budget. A Canadian dollar hole, but still.
A staggering number. A deep recession was basically treated as, a foregone conclusion.
And that's where the real tension of this story is. Canadian leaders, they weren't quiet about the stakes. They publicly called this an existential fight. So for you, the listener, the story is in that huge gap between the predicted chaos, that $78 billion hole, and what actually happened, which was, this surprising, almost unbelievable stability, even growth.
Okay, let's get into that shift then, because for decades, Canada had this global reputation of being the polite neighbor.
Right. Calm, diplomatic.
Patient.
And that's the political capital Washington thought it could exploit. They were banking on Canada being too hesitant to really fight back. But the sources we have, they just confirm that polite neighbor idea completely dissolved the second the threat became real. We're looking at a huge psychological pivot here.
And you can actually pinpoint the day the tone changed. February 2nd, 2025. That's when those initial tariffs landed.
A huge shock.
A huge shock. It slammed into Canadian steel, aluminum, auto parts, key energy exports. And what's really crucial is that it basically shattered parts of the USMCA trade deal overnight.
For businesses that rely on that cross-border flow, I mean, the shock was just immense.
The idea was to force them to capitulate immediately.
But that's not what happened. The sources show the reaction on the ground. It wasn't resignation. We have all these reports from places like Hamilton, from steelworkers and auto employees in Windsor.
Right.
And they describe these tariffs not as some abstract economic policy, but as a punch to their families, to their livelihoods.
Yeah.
And that fear, it didn't lead to panic. It turned into this collective resolve.
It unleashed what one source calls a ruthless comeback, something Washington just did not see coming.
Not at all.
And that ruthlessness, it came from preparation, didn't it? This wasn't some improvised, panicked response.
No, and Prime Minister Mark Carney's leadership was absolutely central. He was out there immediately reassuring the public, and he drew on his past experience, a lot of it.
He had a deep well to draw from. Guiding Canada through the 2008 financial crisis, advising the UK through the chaos of Brexit.
Precisely. That experience gave him a blueprint for crisis response.
Yeah.
The source material shows he'd essentially prepped the ground for this. His strategy was based on three pillars.
Okay.
Deep financial buffers for industries that would get hit, quietly pre-negotiating new supply chain contracts so they could switch to domestic sources fast, and most importantly, having this massive retaliatory package ready to go instantly.
So this wasn't just a reaction, it was a pre-planned strategy to survive a massive shock. Carney basically said, we can control what we do here in this country. And that was the pivot.
It was. And that brings us to the counterpunch. I mean, it was massive and it was immediate. Within days of the U.S. tariffs, Ottawa drops a retaliatory package worth an astonishing 155 billion Canadian dollars.
That number just... It sends such a clear message. It wasn't just political theater. It was a signal that Canada was financially ready for a long, drawn-out fight.
Let's break that number down, though, because it's not just a big figure. It was structured very meticulously.
Right. So initially, $30 billion in tariffs hit U.S. goods.
But they were chosen so carefully. They were designed to create maximum political pain inside the U.S., not just to mirror Canada's losses.
So this was calibrated.
Very.
Yeah.
The tariffs targeted products from politically sensitive states. We're talking about American whiskey, a huge export from Kentucky, Tennessee, high-end appliances from the Midwest, certain farm machinery from states like Iowa.
They weren't picked out of a hat.
Not at all. They were designed to get lobbyists in Washington screaming at the administration to back down.
And the other $125 billion. The rest of it.
That was the trap. That was the signal that Canada was ready to escalate, with even more precision if the U.S. kept pushing. It showed a nation fighting loudly, proudly, and unapologetically, as one source puts it.
So you have this huge contrast in strategies. The U.S. is using a blunt instrument, just trying to crush the economy.
A carpet bombing approach.
Yeah. And Canada's response is focused, it's balanced, like a scalpel. It was a huge shift from just passive diplomacy to using real strategic leverage.
And the atmosphere at the time was, a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Both countries were running these huge risks.
Analysts were throwing out these wild numbers, losses of nearly $12,000 per Canadian, $1,300 per American. The world was just watching, expecting Canada to blink first.
And that financial tension just set the stage for the next move, which was an even bigger escalation from the U.S. in March of 2025.
Right, March. The U.S. decides the first round wasn't enough, so they escalate to what was basically an economic blanket tariff, a 25% tariff on almost everything coming from Canada.
And they doubled the existing tariffs on steel and aluminum.
That move must have felt like a seismic shockwave. Energy exports were in jeopardy. Industries in Ontario and Atlantic Canada that were already hurting were now, pushed right to the brink.
Economists weren't just predicting doom at that point. They were, as you said, genuinely freaking out. The entire trade environment just froze solid.
And this is where the story takes that crucial twist. The focus moves from government policy to just regular people. While all the news sounded terrible, Canada held steady. And the reason is that the nation didn't crumble. Its people mobilized this massive, almost invisible resistance movement.
The sources really highlight this, the power of citizen mobilization. This was consumer activism on a scale Canada had never seen.
It wasn't a government campaign.
Not at all. It was grassroots, powered by a digital organization. You had viral social media challenges promoting local products, online directories popping up to help people find Canadian alternatives for everything from, groceries to car parts.
There was this unstated nationwide understanding that every dollar you spent was a patriotic act.
And we have specific examples of the financial impact. Bars and restaurants across the country started publicly announcing they were dropping American whiskey, American wines for domestic options.
Retailers were reporting these huge, measurable surges in demand for made-in-Canada products, not just raw materials, but things people could easily substitute.
And the stats back it up. We have surveys from that time showing that a staggering 71% of Canadian consumers were actively planning to buy fewer American products that year.
That kind of unified action it blows up economic models that are only based on government policy and price points.
It absolutely does. When consumers move like that, the U.S. supply chain feels the pain in real time, way before official trade numbers come out.
American businesses suddenly realized they were facing a national cultural boycott. It just reinforced the message that this defiance wasn't just policy from Ottawa.
It was a national movement, a unified source of popular purpose. And every blow from Washington just seemed to make that resolve even stronger. So despite all that pressure, Canada stood tall.
Which brings us to the high-level political drama in June 2025. The U.S. president lands in Alberta, and he's expecting to meet a crumbling, apologetic Canadian government ready to beg for a deal.
He was expecting the polite neighbor to finally show up.
And what he got was a shock.
A total shock. He met with Carney and his team, and U.S. diplomatic sources described them as calm, cold, and unflappable. This was not the timid Canada they were used to dealing with. It was an administration with a genuine steel spine.
And their negotiating position was firm. Totally unexpected, no discounts, no softening of the counter tariffs.
And Canada set the terms. They would only negotiate seriously if, quote, real progress is shown by July 24th. They were insisting on negotiating on their own terms.
That unflappable stance, that gave them the leverage for the next curveball, didn't it?
It did. In early July, the U.S., clearly frustrated, announces another surprise wave of 35% tariffs to start August 1st. The economic pressure was now at its absolute max.
But Ottawa's reaction was so measured. No panic statements, just calm affirmations of their existing plan.
And that very calm and composed reaction, paradoxically, is what made the U.S. president start to rethink his entire strategy.
By refusing to get emotional, Canada was controlling the tone of the whole thing.
Exactly. But before we get to the victory lap, we really have to acknowledge the real pain here. Resilience costs something.
For sure. We can't just glide past that.
By November 2025, unemployment in Canada hit 7.1%. That's the highest it had been outside of the initial shock of the pandemic.
And that 7.1% isn't just a number. It's real lives, it's families struggling, small businesses that did collapse under the weight of all this.
It's a vital reminder. This was not a pain-free victory. The risk was enormous, and a lot of people paid a very heavy price.
That context makes the final economic twist so much more powerful.
It does, because despite the unemployment, despite that predicted $78 billion hole, Canada did not fall into recession.
It defied every single doomsday chart. By the end of 2025, the Canadian economy posted roughly 1% growth.
1% growth.
1%! I mean, think about what they were up against. A massive trade shock from their biggest partner, the psychological pressure, the fact that the economy grew at all is, well, it's miraculous.
And the IMF stepped in to assess everything, and their final verdict was, Canada is shaken but stable.
And that stability, as small as it was, that's the whole story right there.
It is. The tariffs, meant to punish Canada, became this unexpected catalyst for transformation, for national unity, for newfound strength on the world stage. The economy proved it could adapt.
So what does this all mean geopolitically? Canada basically wrote a new blueprint for how a middle power can fight back against a superpower without panicking.
And the sources confirm it. Alliances with Europe, with Asia, they strengthened rapidly during this time. International respect for Canada's resolve just soared.
The polite neighbor with the gentle smile was gone.
Gone. Replaced by a nation defined by, as the sources say, fire, steel, and collective resolve. Every single domestic purchase, every boycott, every decision from the government down to the consumer became part of this collective statement.
We will not kneel. We will not be underestimated.
That was the sustained message.
And it wasn't just luck. This was calculated unity, sharpened by months of trial by fire. Canada turned an attack into an opportunity, weakness into leverage.
And that leads us to the final thought, for you to consider as we wrap this up. What started as a trade crisis turned into this profound realization that the real strength of a nation doesn't just come from its government or its financial reserves, it comes from its people. Their unity, their courage, and their absolute refusal to be underestimated.
It suggests that in this new era of economic warfare, maybe the most potent weapon a democracy has is consumer solidarity.
A powerful lesson.
A truly powerful lesson on where national strength really comes from. Thank you for diving deep with us into the source material and the Canadian model of resilience. Keep an eye on the global stage. It'll be interesting to see how other nations might try to adopt that model.